And thank you everybody for coming, and family and friends, and people that I've not met yet. So I'm been happy to chat later, and I'll take questions really at the end of, if you like. And thank you, David, for helping me get this started, because my daughter Tanya would kill me if I'd spent all that time trying to get this onto a PowerPoint so you could see it rather than me just speaking to you. And it's such a beautiful day, so I'm really pleased that you're all here. So, everyone has a story to tell, and this is my story, and I hope you enjoy it. David, next slide, thanks. I was born in 1954. My parents, that's John, or we called him Jack, McPherson and Elaine, my mother and father, they were married in 1947, so really just after the war. Next, David, thanks. Now, this is where it gets really weird, because I've got a birth certificate. It says that I was born en route, and that the extract said that I was born on the way to Queen Victoria Hospital. The year was 1954, and I was born Clare Elizabeth McPherson. Now, unfortunately, to alcoholic parents, where domestic violence within the family was inevitable, and that alcohol-fueled violence led to neglect of the children. So I don't know why anybody would want to write it on your birth certificate, but I would think there's one very angry taxi driver out there probably wanting his fee, or somebody to clean his car up. This is my sister Kathy and I about 1956, and I've got some photos that I brought over just so you can have a look at these little photos. That's in Clayton before we went into children's home. So there's a couple of photos there. So you can flick to the next. That's my older sister Terry and my brother Michael with Kathy and I. It's our little McPherson family. And there we are again. Now the next slide is the enabler of what happened with the Children's Welfare Act in 1958. So in Victoria in 1958, the Children's Welfare Act was introduced, and the purpose of the Act was to consolidate the law to provide for and promote the welfare protection. Yeah, don't move, David, don't breathe. To consolidate the law to provide for and promote the welfare, protection and care of children and young persons. Now, this enabled the state to assume responsibility for the care, custody and control of a child at the exclusion of their parents' rights. This was for the protection of the highly vulnerable children that had no protection either from their birth parents or close relatives within their family. The children had no control over their lives, nor were some of them protected by the welfare system that was set up to protect those children. Now, I tell you this story today, and there may be people here who went through that system as well. So I dedicate it to all the children that went through that system, and that includes myself, my sister Terry, my sister Kathy, and my brother Michael. We were a part of that part of history. So from humble beginnings, that was our little house in Clayton where my parents and we lived in, just a one-bedroom kind of shack thing, I think, a little house. The Children's Court would decide if the child was to be made a ward of the state. If they deemed the child had been neglected, uncontrollable or in moral danger. I thought it should have said mortal danger, but it said moral danger. I don't know if that was in the religious sense or not, but in mortal danger, they would be made wards of the state. The wards of the states were placed in government institutions such as orphanages and children's homes. These institutions were run by religious or charitable organisations, and they were paid per head of child that was living there. The government did also chip in for health and education. Now, about 500,000 children were placed in institutional care across about 800 orphanages and children's homes between about 1920 and 1980. Most of these children were not orphans with at least one or more parents living. They were just unable to care for their children at that period in time. I won't need to read it all out, but this part, I think it's significant. So many children experience neglect, emotional abuse, and in some cases sexual abuse at the hands of those that were in charge, with many children spending their entire childhood and their adolescent years in institutional care. Many decades later, of course, these children were referred to as the forgotten Australians. In 1970, Australia moved away from the institutional care, and because the single mother's pension was introduced. And so, and it became very apparent in those early days of the neglect and some of the sexual abuse cases that were coming out of these children's homes. This is, now if you go back just one photo, David, this is the children's home in Brighton. This is 64 Wilson Street, Brighton. And in 1959, after 12 months of probation, I might add, that my sister Kathy, Terry and I lived. We were sent to 64 Wilson Street. I was 4, and I was there until I was 18. The children's home was a Church of England religious order run by the Sisters of the Holy Name. The original plan was to separate placements for our little family. Michael to a boys' home, Terry to the older girls' section, Kathy to the younger children's dormitories, and me to the Berry Street babies' home. Now, apparently, I have to say this because I was probably only 4. I was 4, and I would put on such a tantrum as the screaming, kicking and crying type. And I think their first mistake was letting me out of the car. And they let me out of the car, probably to try and calm me down. But then when they tried to put me back in the car and take me away from Terry and Kathy and take me to the Berry Street babies' home, I put on such a stressful performance that they decided to let me stay. And probably one look at another taxi and I thought, I'm not getting back in there. So anyway, children under the age of 5 weren't allowed to stay at Wilson Street because it wasn't allowed. It was for older children, and babies went to Berry Street, of course. So apparently I had my first win. After such a traumatic start with the sisters and the older girls probably all as traumatised as me, and in tears trying to pacify me, I became their baby, and they all were so distressed that they let me stay. So they broke their own rules about letting me stay there. Terry said, I only spoke to Terry about this a couple of days ago, and she said, yeah, they used to push you around in the doll's pram. I thought, all right, so that was pretty good. Our upbringing wasn't anything really like normal because I didn't have a brother-sister relationship because we're all separated by age groups in those children's home in dormitories. So Michael at the Gordon Street boys' home, and we never saw him in those earlier days. And also you have to remember that Terry, when I was 4, she was 6. She was just, a baby herself really. And she was our caregiver, and she looked after us, and she fed us. And, she fed us when there was food. Really, it was probably Wheat Bix. She says it was Wheat Bix or bread and dripping. The 4 of us slept together under old army coats. And of course, before I came along, Terry had Kathy and Michael to look after. So I think she did a great job. And Terry said, and we just recently talked about this too, we were seized in the middle of the night by the police. And the reference to them by Kathy and Terry was that they were men in black wet coats. So the police came in the middle of the night, bundled us all up and took us away. So I'm sure that would have been a very traumatic experience for any child. We felt very abandoned, unloved, and we had a very heavy sense of guilt. And I think we're very sad children because we thought we'd done something wrong and we didn't have a family, so we thought we would stick together and that we had to be punished by being locked away in a children's home. But really, the reality is probably saved our lives, just to be cared for. It's the sisters at the Holy Name, they were pretty good, yeah. But the next one, our father, Jack, we always called him Jack, he did come and visit us when we were in the children's home. That was me and Kathy, about 5, I think. I thought I looked pretty cute with the headband on. So he did come and visit us, but our mother never did. Now, how do you control, all those children in the children's home? They're all traumatised. They're all, these days, every report that I read, because I've got a Freedom of Information file here that tells me what happened to me and how I felt and how I was looked after and the things. Did I need a psychiatrist? They asked I think they must have done that every year. No, they didn't think none of us needed help. We were just thrown together. So he did come and visit us, and that's us at about that age. So they use punishment, control and rules. And so I will tell you a bit about it. I decided I didn't really like the rules and the control, so I thought I'd run away. So an older girl hatched an idea with me to run away. So she went over the back fence before me. I scaled the back fence, got up on top, and I heard the dinner bell ringing. So I jumped down and ran back to dinner. I couldn't help myself. So I don't know what happened to her. The police probably picked her up somewhere. Now, the next photo is, this is the Hall family from Whittlesea. They were at King Lake. That was me, still with the same headband on by the looks of it. And they were very good people. But they were my holiday family. They weren't, and I still, they've passed away, the Marianne and Bruce, and the boys, we still see them and catch up with them all the time. But Kathy was never able to come with me because she always got car sick and everything. Next one, David, thanks. Now, Sister Gloria, after the dormitory style thing, they decided that we should go into more family group kind of flats. So they separated it all, and we came back after holidays and they put us into groups. And then they did start to introduce, there were some young boys that came in, so it kind of felt more like a family, but they were kids we didn't know. But, I still think on some of these photos that, next one, thanks, David. Some of the kids look sad, still, pretty traumatised, but it was their shot of making us look like a family. So these group homes were, the sisters were pretty good. This is a photo of the middle one is just, we went back to our grandmother's place in Clayton and had a visit with her, and that was me with either cats in my hand or a broken arm. I think I had one of those experiences as kids did. Now, it was a family mix of kids that you didn't know, but there was lots of kids to play with. Now there was an inquiry conducted by the Senate of Community Affairs, a reference committee set up by the federal government. The report is titled The Forgotten Australians, a report on Australians who experienced institutional care or out-of-home care as children. It was tabled in August 2002. The Minister, Kevin Rudd, at the time Prime Minister, he delivered the national apology on the 16th of November 2009. The apology was to the forgotten Australians and the former child migrants. So there were migrant children who were treated pretty poorly as well. Now, my sister Kathy applied for compensation through the recommendations that came out of the Royal Commission. And that was through the redress scheme, support scheme. And I just Googled this the other day, because as of Thursday, 31st of December last year, there had been 72,855 applications to that scheme to get support. So, you know, for the 500,000 children that went through there, I didn't think that was really very many. We went to public schools, but we were always bullied and taunted about home girls. We never had the right uniforms or, you know, the right shoes or the right school bag. It was all hand-me-down and around. I went to Brighton Kindergarten, Brighton Primary School, Brighton Tech School, but I think I was probably still a very shy, timid little girl who would shrink away when people spoke to me and go red in the face and was all, you know, strange with people. But Kathy always said, you know, she always thought that I was the spoilt one. We did have a discussion many years later about why she hated porridge so much, and why did you like porridge? And I said, I don't hate porridge. She said, but we had it every day for breakfast, and if she didn't eat it for breakfast, she got it for lunch. If they didn't eat it for lunch, she got it for dinner and breakfast the next day. I said, well, I always scraped mine into my apron and threw it out to the dog. So, you know, there was those kinds of experiences she never got over. I often get asked how... I don't really remember those years before we went into the children's home. I don't, but Kathy and Terry and Michael did. They remember the family fights and everything like that. Now, I often get asked why I went from Clare on my birth certificate and to Clare. And I think it really was about separation anxiety and stress and depression and things like that. And I look in that Freedom of Information file, and the sisters referred to me as Clare back in 1960. So I must have made my mark somewhere along the line and said, I didn't think my parents had the right to call me, name me. I think it was about who I wanted to name myself. So I went away from Clara and became Clare. And, I felt that they'd give me up, so they didn't have the right to do that. So that was my way of stamping my foot and saying, no, I'll be Clare. Sister Caroline, of course, and she was a pretty hard taskmaster. She used to have a little switch. She used to get you along with a stick. She used to call me Clara Bow every time I was in trouble, which was quite a lot, and of which I hated, and I didn't understand who the hell Clara Bow was, but she used to refer to me as a little actress. So it's still, yes, Claire is still on my birth certificate, and so is the taxi ride, and it's still on my passport. Now, I wrote this poem, which I'll read to you. Just have a sip of water. I wrote this a few years ago when people used to ask me, why did you go from Clara to Clare? So it's, my name is Clara. I hide amongst the shadows. I'm scared, they say. I walk amongst the children when they play. They stop and they stare and whisper my name. For I'm only plain, they say. I'm not preened and pretty, but ordinary, they say. You must step forward if you have something to say. My name is Clara and I've come to play. So that was a little poem I wrote to kind of work out who I was and how I could describe it to people. Now, moving right along, I don't really remember much about my primary school years either. So, but just having a feeling of being scared and being that little home kid, the kid from the children's home. Everyone just, it's just ignore her, she's just from the children's home. But I do quite clearly remember my first day at secondary school. That was at Brighton Technical School. The big school assembly of all the teachers and principal and everybody. And it was my first assembly, and I still have that vision of me with my plaits and my long socks and my long uniform. In the 70s, nobody wasn't cool to wear long uniforms or long socks. And my name was called out at the assembly, and I was told to come forward, and the principal made an example out of me in front of everybody and humiliated me and said that if I was going to be like my sister Kathy, I could leave now. So I thought, well, I'll show you. There's two ways you could think about it. You could go be very angry and just, retaliate. But anyway, thank goodness, by the time I left school, I was the head prefect or the school captain. That's what we were referred to. And I'd run my first campaign about student rights. And so I'm pretty glad, I'm glad I didn't take Kathy's path right then, because Kathy wasn't the best of students. And on that occasion, I might add, I didn't follow the same path. Kathy was 18 months older than me, so I had grown up in a community full of women, just women and children. That was a bit that we put together. That's more about the forgotten Australians. So by the time I was 18, I'd left school, found a job, and I was working in the ANZ Bank in South Yarra. Sister Jennifer came to me and said, Claire, we need your bed for some more children. And I just said, felt really a bit sad about that, because that was my home. But anyway, the sisters were excited to help me set up a flat. And so we set up a flat with Kathy. Now, after her school days, I don't know if that was a very good idea. But anyway, I moved in with Kathy and we had a good time. And it all worked out all right. And then later on, I moved in with, Kathy and I went and lived with Michael back in Clayton, of all places, and had the 70s party house. So we kind of got our revenge. The notes in the Freedom of Information report says, I was discharged from the children's home on the 9th of the 4th, 1973. By that time, I'd been already let loose into the community. So I can tell you I was a bit surprised when I read that just recently, thinking, wow, that was a bit late. They should have locked the gate earlier than that. And so by 1972, I'd moved out of the children's home, got a flat, got a job and a boyfriend, which was Neil, now a husband. After Neil's mum spoke to me one weekend, I decided to move to the country, because he was driving back to Melbourne all the time to see me. So I left the job at the bank, moved to the country, got my driver's licence, got a job at Archies Creek, and started work on the Tuesday. I think that was pretty life-changing. And then we were married. And then when I looked at the dates, I went, hang on, they discharged me in 73, and I was married by the 2nd of March 74. I didn't let a lot of grass grow under my feet. I just went from one institution to the next. But anyway, we'll be our 2nd of March soon, and it'll be our wedding anniversary again, 52 years. But not only did I get married, but I married into the wonderful family of Le Serves and Hangers from Bass, and gained a mother-in-law, Eve, and 4 sisters, Yvonne, Anne, Janet and Madge, and brother Ian, who's here today, and Yvonne. So thank you, and Ruth, for your support, and in-laws. So I think that apart from the Hall family, who were in Kinglake, and my holiday family, Neil's family showed me what a family was really about. We moved to the farm, and once we were married and had 2 little kids, and milked cows for 15 years with Tanya and Brent. And in the 70s, there was an expectation that women would stay home on the farm, have babies, milk cows, and look after their husbands. Well, I thought, well, that doesn't sound like me. So it was very much a norm for conservative country folk. I mean, it was the expectations, I suppose, that it's a bit like teaching. You know, once you got married, you didn't work. But and I certainly wasn't an angel, but I certainly wasn't going to stay home on the farm either on my own or with kids. And my first encounter with the community on the outside of my life was San Remo, was when Tanya was born. So 1978, San Remo Community Health Centre came knocking on the door and wanted me to come and join a young mum's craft group. So I just shut the door in her face and said, no, thank you. But they said childcare. I thought, oh, hello, that's good, that's an option. And so that was the lure to get me to go to San Remo. I went to the young mums group and did craft. Now, for people that know me, that's not really one of my talents. I've had many things that I've started and could never finish in being crafty. But, you know, it went on to be a full group, and they asked me to make one at Bass, set up a group at Bass, and it was at the Bass Primary. The old schools had closed down, so there was a building there, the old primary school at Bass, and I set up a group. And but to get into to do that, I ran into the old colonial ways again with some local folks who thought that you know, that might have been a dangerous thing. I think setting up a craft group, I didn't think that I'd get that much resistance, but I did. I was told to go milk my cows, look after the kids, look after my husband. I thought, well, we needed that building for the craft group. And I won that battle. There's kind of a lot of information around that one, but you have to kind of stick to your guns, I think, if you want something. So as one of the founding members for the Bass Valley Community Group, which still operates out of the old primary school at Bass, you know, I'm really pleased to say that that centre, you can go to the next photo, David. Oh, that was after my accident, yeah. I feel proud that the community centre still is operating. And you can't, you know, you have to know that it only happens by all the amazing volunteers, like in Coronella here. Got some amazing volunteers, and that's what makes these community centres such wonderful places. So during those early days as the president and manager of the Bass Valley Community Centre, I realised the importance of political pressure, that a community could put that pressure on the government. In 1992, I left work at the community centre and started work at South Gippsland Personnel, which is an employment service for people with disabilities, and I was assistant manager. But unfortunately, I had a car accident in 1993, and that was another big turning point in my life. I broke my neck in that car accident, so that wasn't much fun. And I remember thinking, it's me at the Austin in a wheelchair, and I was 39, and the medical establishment reminded me a bit of the children's home, really. I fitted quite well into that institutional care, but a lot of people didn't. But they were really quite clear. You'd never walk again, you'd never drive again, you'd never work again. And they told me that, my family that, and that you come in as an incomplete quadriplegic and you leave as one. I thought, talk about dream killers, those people. So I spent 6 months at the Austin Spinal Unit and thought, well, got to do something about that too. So anyway, it wasn't easy those days, and we got through it with a lot of things. And it's kind of funny how your mind works, and you've got to, even if it's one little thing you can do for yourself. And I thought, because they used to put you in front of TV and then walk away, and you couldn't have any control over what you did. So I said, just so I had a little bit of movement in my finger, I thought, want something I can poke at the remote, so I can make up my own mind what I want to watch. I want to sit there and watch something that they wanted me to watch. They wanted me to bring a wheelchair home, but I left that on the footpath when we drove away. I thought, that'll teach you. I'm not taking that thing home, I'll rely on it. I bet I saw many people give up, but with spinal cord injuries, as you know, it affects many, many people in many ways, and But it is life-changing and it's lifelong. So once it's done, you can recover a certain bit, but I don't think you ever fully recover from it. And then, of course, I was back in the community. When I got out of hospital and I was able to stand up again and get around, I used to have a little scooter thing, and I had a full body splint that I wore to keep me upright. And so, but then we went back into the community, and we had, lots of things to get on. I was the president again of the Bass Valley Community Group. I became president of the Coronella Community Centre at a period of time. And all our communities are the same. The communities have great needs, and the needs also for women and children. And that's where we got to with childcare. It was critical in this area. We needed it, and we had to fight for it. So with Tanya, who was down here by that time, it was so women could return to work and or study, or even women working as farmers side by side with their husbands. The importance of some safety around children is really important, and childcare is critical. So we formed a committee for the Bass Valley Community Centre, and we were told by council we wouldn't be able to achieve it. I thought, probably just told the wrong person that, but anyway. And then they said, we have to put $75,000 on the table. So, that Phillip Island took 10 years to get their children's centre, because I did the opening at the Phillip Island Children's Centre the first year I was mayor in 2012. So they'd been struggling to get a children's centre as well. So that's, in the next part, I think we got the next one. We stood for council. That was, I think, to be able to make change for these critical infrastructure and projects within the community, you have to have somebody in there putting a hand up for you. So I stood for council, and that was October 2012, and I was elected as a councillor to the Ledbetter ward. That was the largest part of the rural area and all the coastal waterline areas as well. It's a huge ward. And then I was elected mayor, and that was a steep learning curve. The next election, of course, the ward was changed to the Western Port ward, and they had 3 councillors in that ward. So I think, gee, it was great to have other company as councillors to try and pick up some of the slack. So I was in council for 12 years. The Bass Valley Children's Centre, and I say we, the community, because many people in this room helped raise money, and we put $100,000 on the table to the council. Said, right, there you go. Now we give us a, build our centre. And I think council still hold that up to other groups and say, well, look, there's whole communities can raise funds and get major infrastructure and assets in their community, so can you. So, go away and make sure you come back committed. But as a councillor, I was able to make the other councillors get a better understanding of what a children's centre meant to this community, because none of them had any idea really. So it was very important, but as the mayor, I was able to lobby government and on behalf of the council and the community. We received the government grant and council's budget allocation, and the children's centre was built. Now, it's next to the Bass Valley Primary School, and history, the local history determined where that was going to be, so it was only logical that the old kinder was there, but it was logical that the children's centre be located right next door to the school as an early learning years centre. So I've stood for 5 different campaigns in those 12 years, 3 for council and 2 as an independent candidate for the seat of Bass. And just somebody recently, I think you probably, said, this was only just recently, I read this in the paper, and it said, well, you could just complain about politics, or you can get in and try to change it. And I applaud anybody who stands for any elected position and puts a hand up and says that they will, work for the community. I think it was important to make the Cedar Bass marginal so that we get more attention from the governments, no matter what side of the government you're sitting with. But to have a member at the table in the sitting government is really important, because you're not in opposition, you're not being missed out, you're not being not listened to, you're being listened to because it's very important to them. Serving on council, I think, we had our challenging times, but really, personally, it was very rewarding. Every 4 years, you're thrown in amongst a group of people you don't know. Well, very often you don't know them. In fact, you may have even campaigned against them. So out of that, you've got to make a working team, and it takes a while. But as a councillor, you can affect change, but you are the board of directors. You are the finance committee, and you run the budget. And you certainly are dealing with the auditors who are breathing over your neck all the time, over your back. Yeah. And you are the employee of the CEO. Now, until I got in council, I'd worked in the community, not at a corporate level where you're employing CEOs. So you have to make sure that you've got the right people around you to assist you in doing those things. You have to put your personal desires aside. Now, for councillors, that's very hard sometimes. And you have to kind of think about working for the greater good of the bigger community at large. I think that it's about balancing, it's trying to balance needs and expectations. So I think there's difficult times for council in the future years, balancing their budgets, and the needs and wants are growing at an extraordinary rate. The cost of things have gone up enormously. So, it's one thing to say that what we need and what we want, but how do we get there? But it's going to be, it's difficult into the future, I believe. It's been a huge learning curve, and of course, an honour to be able to be involved. We've got good people working in council, because some of the people that work amongst council, the outdoor staff and everybody, they work and they live in our communities. So they're a part of the football club, the cricket club, the soccer clubs, all those things. The kids go to the schools and they keep it all going. But I do feel, I think it's difficult, and I take my hat off to the CEO and all the council staff, like the executive team, because every 4 years the landscape of councillors change. My first term as council, there was one councillor returned out of 7. The next year, I was the only returned councillor, and I did laugh because I'd already had that conversation 4 years ago with the one councillor that was the only one returning. Told him to get out of the way. And then the next lot came in and told me to do basically the same. And my third term, of course, there was 5 of us. But my first and last year as the mayor, that was really, it was an honour to be able to guide the team who have a wide range of views and wants, and believe me, there's many things that they want, and their views are often very different. Now, we'll go through a few. That's just some of the campaign stuff. They loved that, the local paper, Le Serve, Le Maire. Le Serve, she'll give you a serve. Yeah, I remember the strangest photos of all time, all with masks on. It was COVID. There's another one. It was always a good one, preserve the bay, no containers. We went through that campaign, didn't we? So that was a good one. Now, this is my extended family. Back in earlier on, I don't know if you remember that paper, Herald Sun used to have Desperately Seeking. Yeah, well, I thought I was doing some family history just along the way there, when you start to be interested in what's happening in your own DNA side, and I thought I'd just write to them. I didn't know much about my family, only that my mother was one of 6 girls. So I just wrote a letter to the editor of the Desperately Seeking column in Melbourne through the Herald Sun, but really made no other contact other than with my family side, but with kids that I grew up in the children's home with. So I thought, that can't be right, I'm just not hitting the right mark. So I just printed the letter again and sent it to the editor of the Newcastle newspaper. And off that went. And then one day I got a phone call to say, "Oh, I'm your Auntie Joan, I hope you're sitting down." I said, "Right." So I have found out that my mother had passed away in 2002, but after she had left us 4, she'd gone on to New South Wales, back to Newcastle, where she was from originally, had 4 more children. So who I've met and been in contact with, and Mandy, Kenny, Doug and Trudy, and that was Auntie Joan. I thought it was a nice photo of her. My Auntie Joan, she's 98 now, and she still writes to me. She's living independently in a house. She's a good old stick. She kind of gives those home help people a bit of a run for their money, I reckon. So that's how I made contact with the extended family. It's my older sister Terry there, and Kathy, my other sister there. But I thought, well, I went from the youngest to the middle child. Now that changed my life directions. I thought it changed my standing in the family. But after many conversations with Auntie Joan, I believe that it must have been very difficult in those, the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s for women and children. There was no pension, there was no support. The expectation they wouldn't work, and they were caught in a trap of, in a lot of cases, abusive kind of households, which they were trapped in and couldn't get out of. So these days, as you probably all know, that we took on the general store at French Island, Le Serve family, and that's a whole big story on its own. And my lovely 7 grandchildren are all grown up. They're all taller than me now, so I feel like, just shrinking away. Tanya still runs the store and doing a good job of that. And it was another turning point in our lives, because it's one thing to be family, you've got to learn how to work together. Working together is very different to just coming together for Sunday roast. So my philosophy in life is, whatever happens at the end of it, you still got to be family, so you better be a good one. This is my sister Auntie Terry and her 2 daughters, Emily and Natalie, and Sister Penelope, who brought Terry up. So she still had Sister Penelope, who since died, but Terry had a very good relationship with her, and so she looked after Terry. So that was Terry last Sunday when we celebrated her 78th birthday. She's still a very caring and cheerful person, and lives in Cowes, so she's still around. Unfortunately, Michael passed away and we lost Kathy as well, so there's 6 of us in that extended family, so we're all there. Now that Neil and I have had our 50th wedding anniversary, I enjoy things like, I come here to Boomerang Bags. Anybody wants to come, free ad for that. We're doing the bicentenary, the 200 years of Coronella, and living in this wonderful community, and you could be involved in that as well. The other thing, the next one, was the last, that's our family group photo. So from little things, big things grow, I suppose. And so that was a nice photo of everybody come together at our 50th wedding anniversary party. So that was good. Yeah. And then all I can say is I've enjoyed writing these 2 little books. Thank you, Brian, to letting the creative side out of me and knowing that I can do something other than worry about politics in the community. So I have got a third book coming, and once this all settles down, I'll get back into it. So it's called Jock and Crackle. It's about some magpies. So it's been really hard to fit 71 years into all of that, but I hope you've enjoyed it, giving you a snapshot of what my life was about. And thank you for having me. Any questions? Please feel free to look at these books that we've got here. Tanya did that one. That was not mine, but a lot of you would remember the Back to Bass one that we did it for Bass. Tanya did that book for Back to Bass. So the rest of them are there, some photos. And the interesting one is, I wish everybody probably thought they'd have their own information to know when they did what in their lives. So we all we applied to have them given by the government. So that's it. Thank you. Now, thanks, and thank you, David.